Well, good morning, everyone. It's Matthew Chamberlain, Deputy Director, my future NC. Thank you for being here again this morning. I should say that yesterday when we sent around the reminder for today, I got an unusually high number of out-of-office replies. Lots of people seem to be have other obligations today, being off-site at different conferences, conventions, that sort of thing. So this is exactly why we record these things and post them on YouTube. They're all there. So we'll be sending out a reminder email to everybody that they can go back and listen at their leisure. Am I just getting unmuted now? No, okay. So we are gonna get started, and if anybody else joins in, then, you know, so be it. But this is the third of four with Becky. So this one tonight, or this morning, excuse me, is about college success. So I will turn it over to Becky.
Hi, good morning. So we are focusing now on essentially the outcome that we are all trying to get to, which is students graduating from college, and not just graduating from college, graduating kind of in a timely fashion. So we've talked about access, we've talked about persistence, and those are really about kind of that initial entry and often that first year. And the outcome that we're talking about now is a little bit longer in that time horizon. So because of that, we're limiting just to students who graduated between 2009 to 2011. So that's a total of almost 270,000 total students. And we're looking at those students who enrolled in a post-secondary program before May 15th, 2012. It's almost 181,000 of those students, because we need to be able to track them for at least 6 years after they first enrolled, because our metric that we're looking at here is 6-year completion outcomes. And what we found was that among those students from those 3 years of high school graduates who had enrolled in a post-secondary program, about 51%, or 92,317, received a post-secondary degree or some sort of credential within 6 years. And I do want to pause really quickly here and note that while this data that we are receiving and that we are working with is the most comprehensive database that you could get in terms of credentials, the enrollments data that is reported by the National Clearinghouse is slightly higher coverage than the degree verified data. So we can be pretty confident that there are more degrees and credentials earned by our students than we are able to fully identify in the data, but I'm only able to report exactly what we have here. So just know that if you're looking at an institutional level, or if you're looking more broadly to try to understand, we think that there are going to be more than are reported here, but that would require more of an institutional or a local approach than we can get in this data set. And it is more the non-degree credentials at for-profit or shorter term institutions that are going to be less fully captured in this data set, although some of those would be degrees from not-for-profit private institutions as well. So when we look at the students that received those degrees, of those 92,317 degrees completed, we can look at it in one of two ways, right? We can look at first degree received, which is what this pie chart is. And we can also then think about the highest degree received. So when we look at the first degree received, almost 3 of every 4 first degrees was a bachelor's degree. So by far the most common degree that students who graduate are getting is a bachelor's. A few students, their first degree earned is a master's or more. These are traditionally students who are in like a dual enrollment pharmacy and bachelor's program, so an accelerated program where they are simultaneously awarded a master's or a doctorate with their bachelor's within 6 years. About 20% were associate degree earners and 7% were non-degree credentials. And then when we look at how long, when these happened, so we've said 51% of students received a degree within 6 years. Only 32% had received a degree within 4 years, 7% within 3, and 3% within 2 years. And I think that this is, to me, one of the biggest takeaways. Was one of the big things that we found was that although we often talk about being on time, students and graduating within 4 years if you get a bachelor's degree, or 2 years with an associate degree, or up to 150% of normal time, which is 6 years for a bachelor's degree, 3 years for an associate degree. We found that while the bachelor's degree receipts were highly clustered in that time domain, that pattern did not hold for associate degree earners and non-degree credential earners. So a lot of the reason why we see such a large increase at the 4-year mark and the 6-year mark is driven by the bachelor's degree earners. And as you'll see in our next slide, the time to degree by the type varied significantly by the type of degree earned. So the first column here is all degrees conferred. So you see that about half of students received their first degree within 4 years. A little bit less, just over 14% received it in fewer than 4 years. 28% received their degree after 5 years of enrollment, and 10% after 6. What's interesting is that these shorter term degrees, the non-degree credential, the associate degree, have the most variation from the time of first enrollment to the date of degree completion. Some of this, as we'll see in the Pathways report, will be driven by some stop-outs, although many of these are actually continuous part-time enrollments. So you're seeing non-degree credentials taking, often if we think about them, they're typically thought of as 1 or 2 year programs. Some students are not receiving those degrees until 6 years after they first enroll. In contrast, the bachelor's degrees are highly concentrated in 4 or 5 years to completion. And what we see is actually that there's very few students who complete a bachelor's degree in less than 4 years. And even if we look at just the 2009 cohort, we see very few people take longer than 6 years to complete. And in the North Carolina case, we also know that some of the tuition guarantee and the affordability promise is very much tied to on-time degree completion and continuous enrollment, which may be driving some of the fact that if students complete, they complete in 4 to 6 years. And if they don't complete in 4 to 6 years, they just may be very unlikely to complete that bachelor's. And last, the very note down here, this is a very small number of students who are first earning a master's or higher, just 245. And the vast majority of those are taking 6 years, again, reflecting that accelerated program. Now, as I mentioned earlier, first degree is not necessarily the highest degree that people earn. For example, many of these students who enrolled in a bachelor's degree program and completed in 4 years may be seeking an additional degree, and we are cutting off at the 6-year mark. Similarly, students who receive an associate degree in 2 to 3 years may be going on to try to earn a bachelor's degree. And what we see is that when we look at the first versus the highest degree, so the first is this chart on the left, and this is the highest on the right, we see that, as you would expect, some students whose first degree is a non-degree credential went on to earn an associate or a bachelor's degree. Some students who earned an associate went on to earn a bachelor's, and many of the students who earned a bachelor's went on to earn a master's. If we wanted to understand more professional degree attainment, doctoral degree completion, or really the full kind of the full transition matrix here, we would definitely need a time period longer than 6 years, because many of those programs, even if you had on-time enrollment in college and on-time degree completion, they would be taking you much further than the 6-year part. Speaking from experience as somebody who was in post-secondary for, I think, over a decade. So the biggest factor, though, that we then looked at in this report was how some of these, both the time, whether or not students earned any degree or credential within 6 years. So first we looked at completion rate, and then we also looked at, among the students that completed, what was the distribution of degrees that were earned, because that obviously has implications potentially for where those students will be looking for opportunities in the labor market and the potential economic returns to their degree. So we looked at this by 2 factors. First and foremost, we looked by enrollment characteristics, and then we also looked at demographic characteristics. If you have looked at the brief, you can see that we covered quite a lot of ground, and in many cases, there's a lot of overlap. And so I don't want to go through all 25 or plus figures and tables that we have there today. I just wanted to pull out some of the things that I thought were most important when we're talking about post-secondary success and moving North Carolina towards higher completion rates for its students. So first, we're looking at kind of time of enrollment. So when these students enrolled, and if you'll recall, on-time enrollment means that those students enrolled immediately after high school graduation. Within 2 years means that they did not enroll on time, but they enrolled within 2 years after their high school graduation. And more than 2 years means that, you know, the 2009 graduates enrolled sometime after July 1st, 2011. So it's important to note here that we do have a slightly smaller frame, so we may see some differences of students in the more than 2 years if we were able to look at a larger sample, but that's the only time horizon that we have right now. What you can see is that there's really a big difference between enrolling on time, 56% of those students earned a degree within 6 years, versus 22% who enrolled late but within 2 years, and about 24% who took more than 2 years. So I'd look at both the within 2 years and more than 2 years as pretty similar in terms of time to completion, just slight differences because of sample size. So this is in large part driven by the types of institutions that these individuals are enrolling at and some of the underlying characteristics of the individuals who are enrolling, because we know that factors such as socioeconomic disadvantage, lower academic readiness, and so forth are associated with delayed enrollment, and they are also associated with lower likelihood of degree completion. So we're seeing a little bit of an intersection of those two factors there, and you can see that as well when we look at the types of degrees earned. So throughout this report, you'll see a series of blue bar graphs that are the percent who earned a degree, and then these more colorful blue and purple bar graphs, which sum to 100% and tell you the types of degree earned among those students who completed the degree. And you can see here by far the influence of the four-year institutions that, you know, 75% of on-time students earned a bachelor's as their highest degree within 6 years. So we're now focusing on highest degree, and 5% went on to earn a master's or higher. Within 2 years, we're seeing, I think, potentially a little bit of noise there. We do see a lot of master's degree earners. So I think that would be interesting to get more data on those students, but we just need more years of the clearinghouse. So we need 2019 and 2020 to fully understand. But you can see that definitely the students who are delayed enrollment appear to be more focused on non-degree credentials and associate degree attainment than those who are on time. And you'll see more clearly when we look at the degree completion rates by institution of first enrollment. You see very strongly those 4 bars on the left-hand side are all 4-year institutions, while the 3 bars on the right-hand side are all 2-year institutions. And across the board, students who enroll at 4-year institutions are much more likely to earn a degree or credential within 6 years compared to those who started a 2-year institution. Among 4-year institutions, UNC and 4-year public out-of-state institutions have the highest rates at 72% completing, while the 4-year private out-of-state students have the lowest rates, 58%. Among students who start at a 2-year institution, students who first enroll at a North Carolina community college have the highest degree attainment rate within 6 years. So we're definitely seeing big differences by sector, but within each sector, our state's public institutions are the best performing. And then of course, you can see that students who start at UNC or another 4-year are much more likely to earn a bachelor's or higher as their highest degree. Although you do see some of the influence of sector transition. So when some students do transfer from a 4-year institution to a 2-year institution, often due to issues of academic readiness. And so some of those students do start at a 4-year and their highest degree earned is an associate degree or a non-degree credential. In contrast, you can also see the strong role that our two-year institutions play as feeding into ultimate bachelor's degree attainment, as about over a third of all students who start at a two-year institution earn a bachelor's degree or higher within 6 years. Another key finding that we found was really the importance of ever enrolling full-time to timely degree completion. So we created a measure of all enrollment terms that we had observed the student for, and among students who enrolled exclusively full-time for all terms of enrollment, 67% had completed a degree within 6 years, and compared to 7% of students who had never enrolled full-time, so who were exclusively part-time. And when you look at students who were sometimes enrolled full and sometimes enrolled part-time, so that's that mixed full and part-time, they had a 51% completion rate, which we thought just underscored the significance of having at least 1 or 2 terms of full-time enrollment to being able to complete that degree within 6 years. And among those students, you do see that students who are enrolled exclusively part-time throughout their college career very rarely are able to complete a bachelor's degree within 6 years, although 6% of those students who earned a degree and were enrolled part-time only did complete that. Otherwise, we see a little bit mixed. The one other enrollment characteristic piece that I wanted to focus on was just a little bit about retaining versus changing schools. So what we see is that students who were retained at their initial institution had the highest 6-year completion rates, 66%, highlighting the importance of that first match and getting the right mix of probably academic skills with the college and the cost, as well as the important thing here is that students who changed schools were much more likely to graduate than those who did not persist. But we do see that not persisting is not necessarily a predictor of not graduating, as 10% of those students who were not enrolled year 2 did earn a degree or credential within 6 years. So next, I do want to focus just on a few key demographic characteristics and then open it up for questions. Okay, I did see one quick question before we go to demographic stuff, that does the changed schools also include transfers from a community college to a 4-year? And yes, that does. And I think that that is a really important thing, because what we see is that we do see some degree completion within 7 to 9 years, although that is more among students who earn an associate degree. And in the pathways piece, we will be able to pull out that a little bit more concretely. So change schools does include any sort of change, either from a 2-year to a 4-year, from a 4-year to a 2-year, from a private to a public, et cetera. It just means that they are not at the same institution that they first started at. So lastly, I want to look at 2 really key ways in which I think we saw some important demographic characteristics intersecting. And the first was that of economic disadvantage. So this is among students who were economically disadvantaged. So that means that they were eligible for free and reduced price lunch in high school. Not only were they less likely to enroll in college to begin with, only 33% of those students earned a degree or credential within 6 years, compared to 58% of students who were not economically disadvantaged. And one of the other factors that we see there is a really big difference in the types of degrees earned among those students. So economically advantaged students compared to economically disadvantaged students are more likely to earn a bachelor's degree or higher, which are going to confer greater labor market returns. When we look at degree attainment by sex, we do see that male students are much more likely to are much less likely to earn a degree compared to female students. But what was really fascinating, and I will say I checked these numbers multiple times, was that male and female students actually had, among those who did earn a degree or credential, they had virtually identical degree distribution among those. So this was interesting to me. Oh, sorry. I think something just happened. Okay. Is the screen back, guys? All right.
Yeah, it's back.
Sorry. So this was really interesting to me because I had been under the impression that male students were more likely to start at a community college and then maybe more likely to receive a non-degree credential or an associate degree. And so while they are less likely to enroll in post-secondary, they are less likely to persist, and they are less likely to receive a degree. When we look at those degree distributions, they are not distinct from those awarded to female students. And so this is really maybe something more about college access, college going and completion. That may be driving some of the differences more than the types of degrees received. So when we also look at degree attainment by race and ethnicity, we see a significant gap between students who are at the top end and the highest achieving, our Asian and our white students, compared to our Black and American Indian students. So although college going rates among Black students are quite high, the 6-year degree attainment rate is almost half that of Asian students, as is American Indian students. Our Hispanic students, in contrast, go to college at much lower rates, but have fairly high success rates while they're there. When we look at the distribution of degrees earned among degree earners, we see that actually among Black students who earn a degree, their distribution of degrees earned looks much more like that of Asian students. But again, it's this big differential in overall degrees awarded that really highlights the importance of, college persistence, and not just starting college, but completing college. That is really a critical barrier for many of these students. In contrast, for our American Indian and our Hispanic students, lower completion rates and a higher concentration in non-degree credentials and associate degrees, which may just, again, bring up questions about long-term economic disparities or economic opportunities for students that are going to be created by different types of degree attainment. So just in conclusion, this was a pretty dense brief with a lot of information, but one of the big findings is that just over half of post-secondary enrollers completed a degree or credential within 6 years. That does rise to 57% if we go out to 8 years among 2009 graduates. That bachelor's degree is most common first degree earned, and that most of those students complete a degree within 4 to 5 years. But among students who earn other degrees, their time to completion was much more varied, which suggests that the way that we think about a traditional student enrolling on time, going to a 4-year college and earning a bachelor's degree within 4 to 5 years is very inconsistent with students who begin on any other pathway. Completion rates were highest among UNC students for students who began at a 4-year, and North Carolina community students for those who began at a 2-year. And the other thing is that we found enrolling full-time at least once is a really critical factor in timely degree completion. So I know that this was a really dense brief, and so I look forward to any questions that people might have.
There's one in the chat, Becky.
Yeah, so I
Is
just
the attainment data available by both? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We did not specifically look at that in the report, although that could be calculated. So the question was whether attainment data is available by both race and sex. And we do have data for bachelor's completions for those who first received an associate's. So if we look just within 6 years, that is going to be table 1 in the report. And what we see is that among the 18,150 students who first received an associate degree, 3,760 of those students went on to earn a bachelor's degree. So that's about 21% of all students who earned an associate degree went on to earn a bachelor's degree. And if we look, of course, a lot of that transition as well, it's important to keep in mind, a lot of students start at a community college and transfer without earning an associate's. And if we look at students who first started at a 2-year college, there's 24,000 students who graduated who began at a North Carolina community college, and 32% of those students received a bachelor's or higher as their highest degree within 6 years. So there's some pretty robust tables in the report as well. But if there are specific questions that commission members would like to know about, we can also take those and try to do some specific data requests as well.
Anything else? We got a couple of minutes left. If anybody has any last minute. Oh, here's one from Shannon. If my future NC work leads to routine review of this data, how soon after each academic year can this be available?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think, so that would assume then that we would have an annual update of the clearinghouse data. That's a really good question and would entail, I think, a decision about which cohorts to follow and for how long we would want to follow them. Because right now we have 8 cohorts matched. And I think the first year or so might be a little bit longer time horizon, but I would love to say that something like that could probably be delivered on a similar schedule that DPI delivers its accountability metrics. So something like the mid-fall, around this time domain of each year.
Great. Well, we've had 100% participation in terms of questions, so that's good. And
I will say that I think that this memo is probably like in the important but begs more questions than it answers in many cases, because a lot of these questions have been about pathways, and I'm really excited to talk next week about pathways, where we try to drill down into some of the outcomes and the different ways that students travel to those outcomes and what that might mean for planning and policy making.
Well, good. So that'll be at the perfect segue, perfect closing. So that'll be next week, same time, same channel. And thanks to everybody who joined today. And again, we will post this one on YouTube in another day or so. And we'll send out a note to all the commission, just making them aware that in case they miss these, that they can go and find them there. So thanks to you, Becky, and thanks to everybody that participated, and have a good day today.
Thanks, everybody.